In the last section, we finished up our first example of writing out some code that used streams. We're now going to do a quick overview or review of all the code we just wrote. I also took the diagram that we were working with before and cleaned it up a little bit and added in some comments. So let's do it. I'm going to zoom in and go to the far left-hand side. So everything started off when we first created our order instance and then passed it off to our order taker. Now, in reality, the order taker was the stream controller.sync.add function. That add function is how we add new values into a stream that we have created. So the add function essentially took that order and threw it through the front door of our stream. And then the stream started to process that newly created order. Let's go back over to Dartpad and find the line of code where that occurred. Okay, so back over here. Down towards the bottom is where we called add with the order. One thing I want to mention here is that you'll notice that the process of adding the order was 100% decoupled from the process of setting up our stream. That kind of ties back into a note that we discussed earlier about our factory. So one of the characteristics we said that a cake factory has is that the factory was not built when the order was made. Instead, we made the factory at a different point of time, and after the factory or the stream was created, we could then add in as many orders as we wanted to over time. Okay, so back to the diagram. So the order came through our front door, so to speak, and went off to our order inspector. The order inspector's purpose was to just extract the type of cake that we wanted. And so that was, in this case, a string of chocolate. The order inspector was implemented by using the map function that is tied to our stream. So that looks at every event or every value that comes into our stream, did some processing on it, and then returned whatever value got extracted. So inside of Dartpad, that was our map function right here. We took in that incoming order, we extracted off the type property from it, and returned just the type property. As a quick reminder, when we use this arrow function right here, we get that implicit return. So you can kind of imagine that there was a return keyword right there to return just the type. Okay, so we get just the string of chocolate and we pass it on to the next step, which was our baker. So the baker was implemented by creating a stream transformer. That stream transformer takes incoming values, does some computation on them, and then has the ability to add more values back into the stream. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that the stream transformer appears to be very similar in nature to the map function that we used in the step before. In both cases, we did some processing on an incoming value or that incoming order and then returned a new value. The big difference between the map function and the stream transformer is that with the map function, we have a 1-to-1 ratio of incoming events. So in other words, we have one value coming in or one order, and we then returned exactly one string. With the stream transformer, we technically have the ability to have one value come in, and then we can actually call add multiple times inside of our string transformer. So here's stream transformer right here. When we added in the newly created cake, we had called sync.add. We could call add multiple times if we wanted to inside of here. And so we essentially just get a little bit more flexibility with the stream transformer than we do when we make use of the map function down here. But in essence, they're both used for processing incoming values. So the stream transformer's purpose was to look at the incoming type of cake that it needed to create. And if it was equal to the string chocolate, then we created a new instance of cake and returned it. Otherwise, we created a new error. Now, in both cases, we produced a value, and I used the word return, but that's not exactly correct. Instead, we used this sync object right here. Now, one thing I want to mention about this sync object is that it's not technically the same sync that we use down here with our controller. So this sync right here kicked off the entire start of our stream. It was kind of the first step of adding values into the stream at the very top up here. The sync that we get access to right here, if we call sync.add with this thing, it's a separate sync that adds a value kind of like right here or so. So when we call sync.add inside the transformer, it doesn't start the entire process over again. It just adds a new value that continues on from the transform step forward. Okay, so whatever happened, whether we called add or add error, everything ended up inside of our, so to speak, pickup office, which was really that listen function. The listen function ties into a stream, and it gets called with any values coming out of the stream. The listen function is our primary location to take data that is coming out of a stream and somehow interact with it or somehow do something with the data that's coming out. So in our case, we had an initial argument or a first argument right here of just a function. This first function was called with any normal, reasonable values that were coming out of the stream or any non-error values. We also had the named property of onAir right here, which was a function that would be called anytime we added specifically an error value to our stream, which was the case inside of our stream transformer right here with the sync.addError function. Okay, so that's a quick overview of everything we just did. Now there's still a lot more to learn about streams, so we are going to walk through a couple of other examples. But before we do, there's one last quick thing I want to show you. So in a new browser tab, I'm going to navigate to the Dart API documentation, which is at api.dartlang.org/dev. And then once here, we can look at the Dart async section, which is where all the classes that we just used are documented. So inside of here, you'll find the documentation for stream controller. So here's the stream controller class. You can read through the documentation right here very quickly if you want to. We could also look at the stream class, which is the actual stream that we used. There's some really good documentation on here as well that you might want to glance through very quickly. If you scroll down to the method section, you'll also find where we made use of the map function right here. So here's map, here's the listen function. You might want to take a look at some of the other things that are inside of here as well. And then finally, you might still want to look at the stream transformer class as well. So this was essentially our baker of sorts. And so you might want to very quickly read through this documentation. I'm not going to refer back to the documentation terribly often with a lot of the stream stuff, just because if we look at the documentation with every different function we're using, well, we would just be looking at documentation all day. So I do encourage you to keep this documentation open and maybe glance at each function that we're making use of, just so you can get a better idea of how it's documented over here. Okay, so good review. Let's continue in the next section. I do want to make one or two small changes to our chocolate cake factory over here, and then we'll also take a look at some other stream examples.